What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Bradell. Today we're here to discuss, of course, the Packers versus Lions game, but specifically, the Detroit Lions were able to come through in those crucial must-have-it situations, and oftentimes the Green Bay Packers just weren't able to, and that was ultimately the difference in what ended up being a back-and-forth, high-scoring, very close game. But before we dive into the specifics of all that, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. And you can find all my work over at ESPNlacrosse.com, including the article version of what we're going to discuss here today. And for my Wisconsin sports radio fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, you know what to do. Download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for your Wisconsin sports radio needs. You can find me on Sports Lead Monday through Friday from 3 to 6, multiple days per week. So like I said, those must-have-it situations that defined this game, oftentimes in really a lot of NFL games, but particularly ones like we saw Thursday night, back and forth, high scoring, really, really close games, there might only be a handful of plays that really determine the outcome of the game. And that's what it felt like in this Packers-Lions game. And really the difference, those handful of plays that you can pinpoint throughout the course of the game, oftentimes came on third and fourth down. The Green Bay Packers offense struggled to stay on the field in those situations. The Detroit Lions, they were excellent. Third down, obviously, in just about all their fourth down situations. Matt LaFleur said afterwards, that was the difference. The third down, fourth down success that each team had was ultimately the big difference in the outcome of this game. And they were just taking a step back and looking at the overall performance from the Packers and the offense specifically, Green Bay did what you cannot do against this Detroit Lions team. You cannot get off to a slow start. And for the second time this season against Detroit, that's exactly what happened. The offense's first possession, 5 plays and a punt. Second possession, 3 plays and a punt. Third possession, 2 plays and a fumble. I mean, really, given how easily Detroit marched down the field on their first possession, Packers are fortunate that they were only down 10-0 at that point. It felt like it could have been so much more. And we knew coming into this game, obviously, very, very, very big, important matchup for the Packers. Had to win in order to keep their NFC North division hopes alive. And you felt like you could feel that, right? Like you could feel that on the football field, watching them play. There just felt, the offense in particular just felt a bit tight. They just weren't in sync. The offensive line, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, was giving up a lot of pressure. Run game was struggling to get going. I think disjointed is the word I would use to describe the Packers' performance early on. Now, defense, obviously, and again, we'll get to them as well, obviously had their ups and downs in this game, but in that first half, for the most part, they held on as much as they could against what we saw as a very high-powered Lions offense to at least keep Green Bay in the game, right? To give the offense the opportunity to get back into it. And credit to the Packers offense. They were able to do that. Their first touchdown drive, like we talked about on the previous video, it was sparked by Josh Jacobs in the run game. I think on that scoring drive, it was like 12, 13 plays, something like that, and only 2 of them were passing plays. Leaned heavily on Josh Jacobs in the run game. Then coming out of halftime, big downfield throw to Christian Watson. They take advantage of the red zone opportunity, score a touchdown. Keyshawn Nixon forces the interception. Offense again capitalizes, touchdown. You couldn't have scripted the start of that as poorly as the first quarter was. You couldn't have scripted the start of the third quarter any better for this Packers team. Just like that, they had the lead. Fortunately, the defense couldn't hang on. On the 2 instances in the second half where the Green Bay Packers offense regained the lead, the defense gave it right back. The Packers offense never even had the chance to go and add to it. And then at the end of the game, we could all feel it, right? The Packers are down in the red zone. They have that crucial penalty that backs them up, and they have to settle for a field goal that ties the game rather than finding the end zone and giving them the lead. And I assume we could all feel that, right? You knew that was going to just come back to bite them. And Tucker Kraft said afterwards, and not just about that last red zone possession, but in general, there was just too many chances that the Packers didn't capitalize in this game on, offensively, defensively. And again, we can go back to the third down offense, the third down, fourth down defense for Green Bay as really being the key decider in the outcome of this game. In short, the Packers couldn't stay on the field in those critical situations. The Lions could. And then not only did they stay on the field, a lot of times they turned those opportunities on those must-have-it situations into points. Green Bay was 1 of 5 on third downs in this game. And through the first half of the season, we've talked about it on here before, their third down performance was a massive issue for this team. I think going into the bye week, they ranked in the bottom third of the NFL in third down success rate. But in recent weeks, against San Francisco, against Miami, that was a part of their game that's really turned around. We talked about the importance of the run game, Josh Jacobs being in their third down success, that over the last 2 games they converted nearly 50% of their third down opportunities. However, against Detroit, again, just 1 for 5 on third downs. And really, we could tell how the drive was going to end based on what happened on the early downs for the Packers, because that really told us everything. If they were able to pick up a chunk run or were able to get a completion on first down or even second down, they were moving the ball, right? They were staying ahead of the sticks in those advantageous situations. And honestly, they didn't even run into a lot of third downs. As I said, they were 1 for 5. The entire game, they only had 5 third down attempts. So they were really good when they were finding success of just completely avoiding third downs altogether. They were picking up the first down right away or picking up the first down on second down. Again, Jacobs managed a few chunk runs in there. The passing game was getting going at times. So they were finding success on those early downs. And like I said, you could tell how the drive was going to end really by how first and second down started. If they got that initial first down, picked up a chunk run, got a completion, there's a good chance that they were going to make their way down the field. On the flip side, if there's an incomplete pass, Josh Jacobs got bottled up at the line of scrimmage, there's a penalty, whatever it might have been, they couldn't overcome that. And feel a bit repetitive saying this because I know I've had this conversation with you all numerous times this season, but those third and long situations, it's such a tough way to live, right? The pass rush has the advantage. They can pin their ears back from a coverage standpoint against what is a very, very aggressive Lions secondary already. They have the advantage coverage-wise on those third and long situations. And on the drives that the Packers didn't score a touchdown or didn't fumble, they faced a 3rd and 7, punt, 3rd and 6, punt, 3rd and 9, punt, and then 3rd and goal from the 14 at the end of the game where they kicked the field goal. Josh Myers said afterwards, just that first half in particular, and at times in the second half, again, like we talked about at the start, he said just they couldn't get into a rhythm, and they found themselves in too many third and long situations. So that for the offense really was the big factor in whether they moved the ball or not. Did they pick up a good chunk of yardage on first or second down? If not, they're probably in a third and long, and then it ended up in a punt for them. And contributing to that lack of rhythm, right? It wasn't just the passing game. It wasn't just, the receivers love Josh Jacobs. The offensive line, I mean, this was not their best performance by any means. Josh Jacobs averaged 3.7 yards per carry in this game. Pro Football Focus's initial metrics on the game, Jordan Love was pressured on 42% of his dropbacks. Anytime you start to creep over that 35% mark, especially the 40% mark, again, just to provide some context around that, it's quite a bit. And the Lions, credit to them, they knew the Packers wanted to run the ball. They knew that the success for this offense started with Josh Jacobs in the run game. So they utilized a lot of heavy boxes, right? Bringing players closer to the line of scrimmage to take away as best they could Josh Jacobs. And Green Bay, I think to their credit, Matt LaFleur continued to stick with the run game. He didn't become one-dimensional and pass heavy again against what is an aggressive secondary. Not a recipe for success, right? An aggressive secondary that attacks the ball, man coverage heavy, physical group. You give them the upper hand of putting yourself in an obvious passing situation, plays right into this Detroit Lions defense hands. So I think Matt LaFleur did a good job throughout the game of continuing to stick with the run game and not becoming one-dimensional, even though it was tough sledding, even though the offensive line wasn't playing their best. Detroit was, again, playing with heavier boxes to take away those running plays. And for the issues that the offensive line had in this game, we started to see that last week against the Miami Dolphins. Again, Josh Jacobs in that performance averages 2.3 yards per carry in that game. Jordan Love was under pressure 36% of his snaps. And in addition to the heavier boxes and that element of it, the Detroit Lions, they blitzed a ton in this game. I think PFF had them pressure Jordan Love, sending an additional blitzer or an additional pass rusher on 15 of his dropbacks. So they were really trying to do the dictating and manufacture some of those pressures. And you could tell whether it was the stunts, the delayed blitzes, wherever those defenders came from, the offensive line at times was very much caught off guard. Now, it wasn't from start to finish, just a rocky performance. There were good stretches throughout this game from the Packers offensive line, but I think just given what we've seen from this unit this season, and it has been, continuity's been important, the cohesiveness of that unit has been important, but we haven't seen them really struggle to this level as we saw against the Lions team. And this was, again, against the defensive front that's missing a ton of players. So credit to Detroit, their game plan, the heavier boxes, the blitzes, did a good job of making the Packers offensive line uncomfortable. And that isn't to say that that's the only contributor to the out of rhythm, the ups and downs that we saw from the offense, the struggles on third down. But when your run game's getting stuffed or your quarterback's under pressure, has to get rid of the ball, it's an incomplete pass, you find yourself in second and long. You find yourself in third and long. And again, those were the deciding downs. The Packers couldn't overcome those long down and distance situations. So offensive line play, not the only reason for, again, the lack of rhythm, inconsistency at times. But when we take a look at the trickle-down effect of it, as just described, major impact on how this game unfolded between the Packers and Lions on the offensive side of the ball. All right, now let's talk about the Packers' defense against the Detroit Lions offense, because for all the struggles that Green Bay's offense had, again, on those third down situations, the Lions, they were very, very efficient. On third downs, they finished this game 7 of 15. And again, anytime you're around the 50% mark on third downs for a season average, that's among the best in football. It's one of the top 1, 2, 3 teams in football if you're hovering around that 47, 48, 50% mark. So extremely efficient performance from the Lions on third downs. And then we all know about the fourth downs. They were 4 for 5. 2 of them ended up in touchdowns. The last one at the end of the game allowed Detroit to run out the clock or take a timeout with 2 seconds left, kick the field goal, not give Green Bay even a snap on the offensive side of the ball to try to tie the game or to try to win the game. So again, Lions extremely efficient in those situations. And we talked about coming into the game how the big test for this Packers defense was going to come on the run game. I mean, the Lions are one of the most efficient, one of the most effective rushing offenses in football this season, with the combination of David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, yards per carry, missed tackles force, rushes of 10 plus yards. They have their own different styles. Montgomery's more the physical runner. Gibbs is more the speed, but they both are really, really good at making defenders miss. They're both really, really good at picking up chunk yardage. But the Packers, their interior defensive line, I mean, go back and rewatch the game. They were doing a really, really good job for the most part of getting a steady push up the middle. The defensive ends were doing a very, very good job of setting the edges, not letting the ball carriers get to the boundary. David Montgomery would average just 3.6 yards per rush in this game. Jahmyr Gibbs averaged only 2.9 yards per carry. Gibbs came into this game averaging, I think it was 6 yards per rush, which is, I believe, coming into this week, second best mark in football among running backs. So the defensive line did a really good job. And typically, if you're able to stop the run as in that capacity, there's going to be a positive trickle-down effect to the rest of your defense. But that wasn't the case for Green Bay. And it's because of Jared Goff in the passing game. And to some degree, their passing game, particularly the screens, particularly the quick, short area throws, almost mimicked their run game, right? They're struggling to pick up 4, 5, 6 yards on the ground, but they were doing it through the passing game pretty efficiently. And it was that element we talk about all the time. We talked about the offense just a few minutes ago. We talked about the importance of staying ahead of the sticks. So while Detroit wasn't able to consistently do that on the ground, their passing game that at times worked like a pseudo running game helped them do that. And this Lions offense is such a well-oiled machine that if they're constantly living in 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2 situations, I mean, especially when you couple with just how aggressive Dan Campbell is as a play caller, going to go for it on those 4th downs and on a lot of, almost regardless of the situation, almost regardless of where you are on the field. So they have an extra down to try to pick up those 1, 2, 3 yards that they need to gain. Really, really, really difficult, challenging offense to defend. Because at that point, the whole playbook is open to Detroit. I mean, if they're in a 2nd-4, they could run it, they could pass it, they could take a shot play, they could utilize play action, and then there's all the motion, the misdirection, the screens that they mix in. I mean, there is so much going on pre-snap and even as the snap unfolds for a defense to be mindful of that it slows you down, right? Because you're trying to decipher what's what and how your responsibility fits into that. And it just takes that split second of hesitation for a running lane to open up, for the blocker to get in an advantageous situation. It takes a half step in the wrong direction for there to be a passing lane that's there to take advantage of. So all offenses have the advantage, again, when in 2nd and short, 3rd and short. But this Lions group, for all the reasons mentioned, for all the just different elements that they're able to throw at opposing defenses, keeping them off balance, keeping them on their heels, becomes a really, really difficult group to defend. And while the run game didn't always put the Lions ahead of the sticks and in those advantageous situations, the passing game, again, screens, short area throws, attacking the middle of the field, they did a really, really good job of, again, utilizing that to help keep them on schedule, to keep them ahead of the sticks, to keep them in those advantageous situations. And on the game, Goff, 32 of 41, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. We mentioned the middle of the field. Lights out, 14 of 17, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And again, the Lions did a really, really good job of creating that space over the middle for them to take advantage of. Again, we talked about the running backs in the passing game. You would see Gibbs or Montgomery leak out to the flats. It would grab the linebacker's attention. And again, just takes that half step in the other direction. And for all of a sudden there to be a lot of space in the middle of the field for Jared Goff in the passing game to attack. There's always the threat of the run game with this offense. Again, they weren't overly efficient as in the run game, but they continued to rely on it. And when you're ahead of the sticks and you're in those advantageous situations and there's a threat of the run game as a defender, whether anyone in the front 7, I mean, you have to be mindful of whether it's a run or a pass. So again, keeping you off balance, keeping you guessing, opening up those passing lane windows because that's perhaps slight hesitations. You're trying to decipher, is it a run, is it a pass, is play action, who's going where? So again, for all the reasons mentioned, what we just talked about, the motion misdirection, Lions did a terrific job of just keeping Green Bay off balance and utilizing, because they do have so many playmakers, like Matt LaFleur talked about, they do have so many guys that can pick up yards after the catch to where the ball can go to in really any situation, that it spreads the defense out. There's more space to operate in. And this offense, we saw it the first time these teams met too, is so good at attacking those spaces, attacking those gaps in the defense. And this week, it was the middle of the field, and they absolutely exploited this Packers defense. Again, put the linebacker position in a really, really tough bind, again, for all of the reasons that we just mentioned. And then you had, deep crossers that were clearing the safeties out, or downfield routes. Again, guys running to the flat. All of that took away from the middle of the field or created some hesitation, and that's where the opportunities were. Now, the 4-man pass rush we talked about coming into this game for Green Bay, they were building some momentum. We also talked about that this opponent was going to be a really, really tough test for them. Again, getting pressure on Jared Goff. It's a must. He's lights out from a clean pocket, as we saw, but it's a really, really difficult task as well. Again, from a pure numbers perspective, when you play in a 4-3 front, you're at a disadvantage. You have 4 linemen, they have 5 blockers. They keep a tight end in to chip, they have 6 blockers, you have 4. It's innately more difficult to get after the quarterback if you're in a 4-3, just from a pure numbers perspective. But adding to that difficulty is Goff in the quick game. I think Pro Football Focus's initial numbers for Jared Goff's average time to throw was around 2.3 seconds. Anytime you're under the 2.5 second mark, 2.5 seconds, you're making it really, really tough on the defensive front. It is difficult to consistently win your matchup that quickly and then still get to the quarterback to disrupt them. So the quick passing game, again, made things really difficult on this Packers front. The motion, the misdirection, the play action, everything we just mentioned, because, again, there's an eye candy element to it, right? It just takes you flowing one half step in the wrong direction, takes a hesitation, it takes you deciphering whether it's a run or a pass. That takes away the bite from the pass rush. Now, this isn't to excuse the pass rush for not getting more pressure. At the end of the day, you got to get home, right? That's the responsibility. That's your role. You have to find a way to win your one-on-one matchup. So this isn't me excusing the performance. They got to see more pressure from that group. But I also want to provide some context around it, and this is a really, really difficult matchup to do that. So to try to counter those situations, Jeff Hafley dialed up a lot of pressures. I said on the offensive side of the ball for Green Bay, Detroit blitzed Jordan Love 15 times. By PFF's numbers, the Packers blitzed Jared Goff 17 times in this game. But again, quick passing game. Credit to David Montgomery, Lions running backs. Did a good job picking up those pressures. And the other element to it, the screens. I mean, the Lions just dialed up those screens, the counter, the ideal counter to those blitzes in perfect situations. And to a degree, by the time it started to get towards the end of the game, late third quarter, fourth quarter, you could feel it coming. Right? It's a third down. Packers got to get off the field. They're struggling to generate pressure on Jared Goff, which is a must with their 4-man rush. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to be disruptive. You're going to try to get an opportunity to get off the field. Let's capitalize on it. Let's take advantage of it. Let's send some pressure. Lions knew that was coming, right? So they dial up a screen. Blitzers are upfield. Blockers get into position. They pick up 5, 6, 10 yards, whatever they needed on that third down to extend the drive, which again helped their overall third down, fourth down numbers. So this is a well-oiled machine. The Lions offense and the Packers defense, as they do, the Lions offense did a good job of taking advantage of the opportunities that they found themselves in. And oftentimes, because of that short to intermediate passing game, because of the steadiness of the run game, just relying on it, because of the screens, they were able to stay ahead of the sticks. And again, ultimately at the end of the game, there's probably a handful of plays that we can go back and point to, give or take, and say those were some of the defining elements of this game. And again, a lot of it goes back to those third and fourth downs. Packers couldn't stay on the field in those key situations to sustain drives. The Lions, more often than not, they were able to stay on the field, extend those drives, turn it into points. And when you come up big in those key situations, more often than not, you're probably going to end up winning the game. All right, before we wrap up here, one last thing. If you came into this game, Packers versus Lions, feeling good about this Packers team, you still should. Obviously, there's no consolation prizes, right? Especially for a team that views themselves as a contender. If you're going to make a playoff run, if you're going to give yourself a chance to get to the Super Bowl, you have to win these games. You're going to have to probably win a difficult road matchup. You're obviously, once the playoffs arrive, you're going to have to beat a really good team. And the Packers didn't do that. They did not do that. However, like I said, if you felt good about this team coming into the game, you still should. This is a good Packers team. This is a Packers team that can hang with anyone in the NFL. The Lions, they're better. They are better right now. Doesn't mean that things can't change. Doesn't mean the Packers can't get hot. Doesn't mean that if they meet again in January, the Packers can't come away with the win. But right now, this Lions team is the better of the two. And it was a hard-fought, resilient performance by the Packers. Had the opportunity late in the game to come away with the win, just couldn't, throughout the course of the game, make enough of those plays. The Lions are the better team, and for all the reasons we just discussed in this video, it showed primarily in those key must-have-it, got to convert third and fourth down situations, which was ultimately the difference in this game. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the channel. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. You can find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. My Wisconsin sports radio fans, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. And until next time, friends, take care. See you then.